It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Aubrey Quinn. Hi, Aubrey. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Douglas. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Pleasure to have you here. I was a bit intrigued by your bio because of the subject matter of video games. And I'm kind of too old for video games. I mean, I was in high school when Pong came out. So it was already a little bit beyond my interest level. I'm looking at your bio here, and it says that Entertainment Software Association has served as the voice and advocate for the U.S. video game industry since 1994. Now, Pong was almost 20 years before that. But 1994, what was going on then? Was that Nintendo and Super Mario and Atari? Is that about right?
Yeah, first, you and I just had our first fight, our first disagreement, because no one is too old for video games. But we'll put a pin in that, and we will come back to that.
Okay.
But 1994, when you go back in time, we go back 3 decades. Nintendo, yes, was a home console. There were a lot of arcade games. People were playing more and more PC games. You talk to kids, children of the 80s, 90s, they were doing Oregon Trail in classes. They were starting to play a lot of video games that way, almost from an educational perspective. But that was before the PlayStation was in the United States. That was before the Xbox was in the United States by several years. And so it's it's a fun blast from the past to think about 1994. It's changed a lot in 3 decades.
Well, even like I said, going back into the 70s, I mean, Pong came out when I was in high school, and it was the only one that people had at home anyways. There were arcade games like, what was going on then? Pac-Man, maybe, and Space Invaders or something like that. But even then, I was kind of like, if I had been 10 years younger, I think I would have been, ooh, that's pretty cool. But even then, I was sort of like, this is... And then I gradually just got older and older, and the games got more sophisticated. So by 1994, I was already into my 30s. And I do remember getting a used Nintendo from somebody who just sort of threw it away. They said, I don't want it anymore. Do you want it? And I said, yeah, I'll try it. And so I took it home, and it was kind of fun. It was okay. But now they're amazing. I mean, the stuff I've seen on PlayStation is like, it's hard to tell if it's even real or not.
Yeah, I've had people mention to me they love Madden, the NFL football game from Electronic Arts, and the quality of the game, both college football, which came out last year for the first time in over a decade, and Madden. People, if you just walk by it, you may not realize right away that it's a video game, that the quality is so good. But one thing I have found as I have paid attention to video games and who plays video games is that the advancement in technologies means that video games are able to meet people wherever they are. So you might play video games, the people in your life may play video games, but because it's not on a console, it's not on one of the Nintendos or PlayStations or Xboxes, you might not think of yourself as a gamer. But when we talk to boomers, so 59 to 77, the silent generation, 78 and older, almost all of them are playing video games every single week. They're just primarily doing it on their smartphones or on tablets. And we find that so many of them are playing Wordle or mind games, or they're connecting with friends to play card games online because it allows them to stay connected to friends. It feels like it's exercising their mind. And so when we think about the universe of games, you need to think about it in this really broad way. How are people using games? Why are they playing games? And it doesn't just look like console on a television anymore. The advancements of smartphone and smartphone technology means everyone has a game device in their pocket. If you look around airplanes the next time you travel, more and more people are playing games. On flights, they're playing games in waiting rooms. And there are a lot of mental benefits to keeping your mind sharp, engaging in this level of strategy, math, puzzle solving, in ways that maybe other forms of screen time don't do.
Okay, well, you got me there. I have to admit that I do, when I travel, play Angry Bird on my phone.
There it is.
Yeah,
Everyone's a gamer. Yes. Yes, so that's a video game. And that's something I have loved about this industry is that they have looked at different forms of technology and different forms of storytelling. And really the same way you can go to a bookstore and find a book that appeals to everyone. You can go to a music store and find a genre or artist who appeals to everyone. Video games are another form of art and entertainment. And the game that I like to play may not be your favorite, but you are playing Angry Birds, right? I have friends who are playing Candy Crush or Wordle every single day. It's something they do with parents, with friends. And my kids are playing very different games than I'm playing. The same way we're watching different movies, we're reading different books, but there really is something for everyone today.
So what does Entertainment Software Association actually do? What do you guys do?
Sure. So ESA is the trade association that represents the U.S. video game industry. Most industries in the country have a trade association that represents them to policymakers, to elected officials, where there's collective interest for an industry. The association often serves as that one sole unanimous voice with federal policymakers, state policymakers, regulators to represent the industry. So the ESA represents the companies that makes the games we all love to play. But my really cool job, at least my kids think mom is very cool, I get to talk about the benefits and impact of games that people often find surprising, like all these things we're talking about right now.
Well, we've touched on all the positive points of the games, but there have been some negative reactions and comments and things for people that saying they're playing too much, even to the point of kids who have played the very violent games and then end up being a school shooter or something. There's been this sort of debate on how violent the games should be, whether they need to be regulated, and how they're impacting kids' mental health. What do you say to that? Yeah,
so there are actually a couple topics baked in there, but let's start with violence in video games. So I want to be really clear about this for your listeners because the scientific and academic research show that violent video games do not cause real-life violent behavior. So this was something, that academic scientists started studying decades ago because they wanted to see how this impacts kids' behavior. But it shows that there is no causation, and that a good fact to remind ourselves of is that these same games are available all around the world, but this type of violence is uniquely taking place in the United States. So in terms of that school shooter connection, that's pretty clearly been debunked. The other thing that I especially talk to parents about when they're worried about violent games is that all games are age-rated. So there are violent movies, right? I have a 10-year-old daughter at home. I have a 20-year-old son at school. They watch very different TV shows. They watch very different movies. And there are very different video games for different maturity levels and ages. And just like movies have age ratings, video games have age ratings. They've had age ratings for decades. So if you're concerned about violent or mature content in any form of entertainment, you shouldn't bring those violent video games into your home. The good news for parents is the vast majority, over 80% of games are rated E for everyone, E10+, or T for teen. The vast majority of games that are created are meant for younger audiences, and they don't have those violent themes. So, I say with my 10-year-old, I'm not letting her watch Quentin Tarantino films. If it's rated R, it's a good indication for me that it's probably not good content for her. Same's true with video games. She is only playing E and E10 plus in our house. So that's the piece on violence that I think is really important. Scientific academic research shows that connection is not true. It was all speculative when we were, when we are concerned about new forms of media and entertainment that we're introducing to our kids. But also use the ESRB age ratings so you can choose the games that are appropriate for your kids based on content level.
Okay.
The second, in terms of screen time, that's a really personal decision for every family. I'm not here ever to parent shame someone for how much time their kids play for various reasons. I often find myself reminding parents, yes, we all wish we had perfectly healthy kids, but some kids are immunocompromised. They're being treated for cancer. They might have disabilities, and video games give them a social outlet and an action outlet that they wouldn't have otherwise. So let's acknowledge that every family and every kid is different, but the video game industry has long prioritized creating positive experiences for the player community and giving parents tools to manage gameplay. What I love about the consoles now is that all of them have parental controls, and you can limit screen time. You can limit the times of day kids play, the days of weeks that kids play. So I always tell parents, use the parental controls. They're super easy to use and set up. If you can use a smartphone, if you can text on a smartphone, that is exactly how the functions work. And so I say use the parental controls, let them be the bad guys. Your kids have to ask you for more time. They have to ask if they can play during certain hours of the day. So it's a really powerful tool baked right into the consoles to help give parents the resources to manage gameplay that makes sense for their family.
Well, I suppose another option would be to stick a coin slot on them like the old ones were. Then your kids...
Right, in the arcade?
Yeah, them have to put another quarter in for 10 more minutes, and then, your kids would save money as well. You tell them they get the money back, something like that, recycle
I
it.
love that. Growing up in my house, I'm a little younger than you, child of the 80s, we were allowed, my parents had really strict screen time rules. We were a very conservative household, and I was allowed to watch, I think, an hour, maybe two if they were generous, of cartoons on Saturday mornings. That was the rule that made sense for my family. Now I'm the parent and I have my own screen time rules, and I would much rather my kids use their screen time playing video games than just doom scrolling on social media or, just flipping through TV shows, because there's this growing body of scientific academic research that shows that video games are improving our cognitive skills. They teach kids strategy. They teach them resilience. They lose, they have to start over. They teach them how to communicate and work with other people and work as a team. And so in terms of active screen time versus passive screen time, I really like that my kids are creating things, they're strategizing, they're building entire worlds. They have this interactive element, and then the screen time limits go on and they can't play more than 2 hours. But given the choice between passive and active screen time, that engagement, use of their mind versus just sitting and consuming, I personally lean towards video games every time.
Well, you brought up social media, and I was going to touch on that just before we wrapped up the interview. There has been a lot of debate as well about social media being detrimental to mental health of kids and adults, for that matter, I think for everybody. And we were talking about limiting screen time. Why would playing a video game be more beneficial than kids being on Facebook or TikTok?
Yeah, I don't have, to be clear to you and your audience, I don't, work in social media, so I don't want to have that debate, certainly, or make it seem like a debate. There is a reason for lots of different types of screen time and apps and functions and programs and software. I love to use social media to stay connected to friends and family who live across the country, see their kids, their families. So I think, what you choose to use is a very personal decision. What I can say for sure is that the scientific and academic research specifically to video games shows that the way our minds interact the way we stay engaged, like I said, the cognitive skills. One of my favorite studies about kids who play video games is that they learn how to learn. There's a lot of reading baked into video games. Another one of my favorite studies says that girls who play video games are 3 times more likely than their peers that don't to pursue STEM, high-paying STEM careers. So there are a lot of these benefits that are coming forward about video games specifically. I don't have the social media research in front of me, but when you think about the reason why we use social media or why we use video games, social media you use to connect with other people, right? Like that's the reason for its purpose. Video games, maybe you communicate with other people. Most of the time you don't. Most people who play video games are playing solo or they're not interacting with other people, right? Like Angry Birds. But the format and the reason we communicate within games is usually for gameplay. It's for strategizing. It's for communicating. Again, it's reinforcing those collaborative and communicative skills. So just in terms of why we use the mediums, I find myself doom scrolling, getting caught up in Instagram reels before the end of the night, and it's mindless. Maybe there's some benefit to that. I don't have that research in front of me, but I do know for sure that when we're playing games, we're exercising our brains in a really positive way. There's a lot of research about older players, and it's staving off cognitive decline, helping with loneliness, helping with depression. And those are all benefits that I think there's true value in. And so not comparing the types of screen time, but looking at video games singularly, we know that there are a lot of social, emotional, and mental benefits to that form of screen time.
Well, I would just add that social media is more personal. You have to set up your own profile, and the whole point is really about you and who you're interacting with. With the game, the whole point's the game. You're just a player. You could be just an avatar, and nobody knows who you are. If it's a group game, or like you said, doing it solo. Social media is difficult to do solo.
That would be a very isolating social
especially
experience.
if you had no friends. Yes.
Oh, just the purpose, right? Like the point behind them. They're so different. It's hard to compare. There are things that are similar. They involve screens. In some cases, they involve other people, but it's sort of like comparing email to social media. They're fundamentally different. I feel like it's a very apples to oranges comparison when people try to compare the two. Yeah,
I don't think you can. Not with any equality to the two, other than you would use the same device, perhaps, to view it. That might be the only equality between them. I guess the last question I would ask you is, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. Anyone who wants to learn about ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, can absolutely visit us at theesa.com. But for people who have specific questions about these age ratings we were talking about or the parental controls I was telling you about, I'd actually direct you to ESRB's website. That's the independent organization that rates games, helps parents set up parental controls. They're ESRB.org, and that's an invaluable tool for parents and grandparents of gamers.
Okay, you said ESRB.org?
That's right.
Okay, we'll put that one in the show notes. I think that one is important.
Yeah. It's great. Yes, highly recommend.
Okay, Aubrey. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was nice talking to you, and hope everything goes well in your life, and best of luck.
Thanks for having me, Douglas. Have a good afternoon.